What's up, everyone? Carmen here with Pittsburgh White Sports, coming at you with another deck tech. I'm joined today by Brian.
I'm here. Hello.
Today we are going over the brand new meta threat, Mushoku Tensei 8 Standby. Post-ban list, a lot of people are thinking that this is going to be like the deck to beat. The new standby deck that will dictate your power lines in every deck to determine what you're going to get over, what you're not going to get over. But whether that will be true or not, whether or not we'll get some sort of crazy English exclusive, who knows? But neither here nor there. Let's run over the deck. So here's the full list laid out. If you're just here for the deck list, we always have the Encore decks link in the description, but leave us a like on the way out. It really helps out. But yep, as you can see here, pretty standard 8 standby lineup. 4 1-1s, some auxiliary 1-0s, a little bit of extra 2-2s. We'll get into why. Lots of defensive counters, lots of buff cards, level 3 that we can bring out at level 2, and then a very shaved down level 0 lineup. You'll notice in this standby deck, we are running a lot more 1-ofs than usual. A really big reason why, and we'll get into that when we get into the cards, which we're going to jump into right now. So first off, we got the Talent for Magic Rudy. He is a 3500 center runner, literally the exact same text as Armin runner. The best of both worlds. You're both evasive and you're big. Your opponent to clear it, they have to commit 2 35 or higher cards just to get rid of it. And then, you know, the usual big running card lives exactly what standby wants. So they get that turn 1 plus so they can attack again and still have hand resource filter. We are also playing 3 of the Roxy Brainstorm. It's really important that we play a larger amount of this card because we get early because we need to have Roxy name on field for another card that we're playing. However, it's also very synergetic. Self-tap Salvage Brainstorm, always good because you want to fill your grave, so that's going to be your toolbox. You're brainstorming in an unknown zone. Salvage Brainstorms are always search brainstorms. And then you also have this really cool effect whenever you slam a climax, any climax type, but here, you know, with standby, you choose one of your characters and give it Twin Drive. She can also choose herself, which not a lot of people, any character. So you give a character Twin Drive, you can pay out trigger standbys or dig to trigger more standby every turn, play a climax.
Twin Drive's so good in standby.
Yeah, you just push extra triggers, get bigger board. Because in this deck, the name of the game is building your biggest board as quickly as possible because you trade hand on core for really big power. So that's the name of the game here. Moving on, 3 of this Rougerd. So this is a snow sprite profile. It's kind of weird. Not a lot of decks have access to this. It's on play. Take any card from your hand, put it into your clock, search a character. So what this lets us do is it lets us not only push ourselves to the next level, kind of like how a Ricky would, just so that we can level up. It can put us from 0-6 to 1, so that we can play a standby and standby level 2. Put us from 1-6 to 2. We'll combine with another card that we have to clock ourselves later at level 1. You can accelerate yourself 2 to put out really big support targets so that your board is like nigh unreversible that early if you take some damage early. But more importantly, it lets you search on your first turn, which lets us run really cool tech cards like this Rudy PR. We're only playing one of it because ideally we're going to search it with Rougerd. But on play, you choose one of your opponent's costier or lower characters as long as it's alone in their center stage, and you just kill it straight up. No combat, just kill it. So it outs your opponent's runners. In the mirror, it kills Rudy against Kaguya. It kills all their runners, even post-ban list, kills their back row runner, kills their bomb runner. Anyone who opens a big card going first, expecting for it to live board, you slam down your Rougerd, throw a card from your hand into clock, grab your Rudy, attack twice, and then when Rudy dies, you can pay 2 and salvage any character, including himself. You can actually grab him back. Not a normal play in 8 standby, but maybe something to think about if you're looking at voice-centric build. Because it's,
if you need to pay that too, I mean, it is an option.
Outside of brainstorming, it's one of the deck's only good grave access cards, because we're notably not running the Lilial, which you could run in this deck. It's a tap back row that gives something like stock kick, so it hard removes cards off the board, and then you can also tap it to discard an event and salvage a character, so it turns some of your events into grave access. But we're going to run the Rudy, because even with Kaguya banned, it's still good to be able to nuke your opponent's going first cards and make them play around with something like that, just because you're playing Mushoku Tensei. They have to acknowledge it.
So does Mushoku even have a traditional Ricky, or is Rougerd the best that they've got?
They do not. This is their best form of self-clock.
Okay, I mean, well, it plays right into the whole pulling out your tech cards early, like you just said. So it works just fine and gives you a lot of control over what level you're at, which is extremely important in a standby deck.
Yeah, it's like on command level, not like on reverse or stanky or on play.
So, I mean, it does the job. Yeah.
2 more level 0s, also tech cards. We got the Offering a Hand Rudy. It's on play, give a character 1k, and then when you play a climax, you can bounce them back to your hand. Look at top 2, rearrange them, and give a character 1k again. Notably, this card is also 2k. I think this card is actually like overstated power creep. These power like pump bounce back standby cards are never this good. This is like every version of this card made better. Like, as you think about the slime one, it surveils on play and then bounces back and gives 2k. There are ones that give 1k K-Cross turn. There are ones that have other abilities, but this is splittable. Helps you get over the 2 different lanes at once, and then also sets your top triggers for standby because you never want to trigger standby. So really important card. We're only playing one of it because we can rip it out of our deck anytime between 0 and 1, and every other copy past it is dead, so we get down to 1 copy. Similarly, we have the Guild Receptionist. This is kind of like our panic button. It's a spammable search brainstorm. Has some really good utility in a standby deck because it lets us entomb targets from deck, so you can just like Foolish Burial a standby target from deck if you don't want to search, or you can filter something out of your hand, and of course you can spend all your stock just to get on-demand deck speed, but it also has an additional filter effect when you play it with 2 or more other characters on field. You get to draw ditch, so it's a dual-purpose filtering card that's also just like our emergency deck speed button because Mushoku Tensei does not have a card like Free Play. So this is kind of like our 1-card deck speed patch, and it does really well because we have such high selection throughout the game, so we only need to run 1 copy of it. But this card's really, really good. It's actually so good that for a while I was not playing the blue event stuff, which we're going to talk about in 1 second here. I was just running this card, and the deck actually performed really well, just not as well, the blue stuff. All right, speaking of the blue stuff, you got the Roxy Bonder. On play, you look at the top card of your opponent's deck, look at the bottom card of their deck. Pretty janky effect, but sometimes it informs your attack order. Most of the time it's useless. And then on play, discard a card from your hand and salvage the 1/0 amulet. So this is going to be our main ditch engine, because not only does the Bonder have a ditch out for a hand filter, the event itself is also a hand filter. So you can't play this unless you have a Roxy on field. So either this Bonder or our Brainstorm, our key Roxys that we're trying to hit early. Play this. On play, search a character from your deck, put it in your hand, shuffle your deck, and then if you add a character to hand, discard a card from your... You search a card from your deck, then discard a card, so it can entomb a card directly from deck for a -1. Then this card goes to memory, and then when you level up, you choose optionally to pop any number of this amulet from your memory and search that many characters, and you don't have ditch. So over time, it just goes even. However, if you refresh with these cards in memory, you do compress quite a bit extra free, as well as giving you on-demand selection all the time. So a really, really useful card. You're gonna have to like learn how to finesse this card. Maybe like a separate video we can make on how exactly like all the different ways you can use the Roxy pendant. But there are a lot of different use cases for it. It's a very in-the-moment card. Either entomb a card, or you search a card, you filter a card, do it just for memory. And then the pop to search when you level up enables a lot of other cool plays, especially with our level 3s with like early plays. We get to run really low counts of really powerful but very specific cards that can really give us the edge in specific matchups. It's really, really cool. It's something Mushoku Tensei can do that no other set can do. The Roxy pendant is like the card for Mushoku Tensei.
Yeah, you also get to do that cool thing where in the middle of your opponent's attacks, if they level you up with attacks still remaining, you can then dig through your deck for both things that you want and to thin your deck for cancels in the middle of your opponent's attacks.
Ever had a tap counter get searched mid-combat phase? That's pretty sick, cool.
Yeah.
Or an anti-change counter. Got some really, really nasty use. But yeah, moving on to level 1. We got the Eris 1/1. So this is our 1/1 7500 standby target. It's got a really cool condition where if we are literally playing a legal deck, it is 7500 power. So you don't have to worry about not having your power if you put this at front row at 0 or something like that. It's always going to be big, which is really nice. It lets you push it up early without much care a lot of the time, even though it doesn't have standby, as long as you can mine your opponent's power threshold. And then on play of the climax, on play, as long as you have another character, you mill top 2 and salvage a character equal to that combined levels of cards milled. So what this can do is it can make sure that we always get our tech level 0s, of which we have many of. It can always rip back a Roxy Bonder. It always makes sure we have our 1/0 counter if we want it, despite only running 1 copy if we need it for that specific matchup, to make sure we deny our opponent's lanes, just because we can always on play of climax rip back those tech cards, rip back that counter. It's a super invaluable hyper synergistic effect for the deck. The only downside of this card, the mill is mandatory if you happen to play the Eris standby from hand. A lot of people coming into Mushoku Tensei, they might try to play it like a more traditional deck, kind of like Slime, where you kind of hold your level 1 standby and then play it for your level 1, which of course would be nice if you can support it in Mushoku Tensei, but Mushoku 8 standby plays a lot more like a traditional 8 standby deck, like 8 standby Dao, where you come into the deck thinking, I am running 8 blank standby triggers, I'm going to build my army and build the best board as I can, rather than playing for climax combos. Climax combos are far more incidental than a deck like Slime. So keep that in mind when you're slamming climaxes, because the mill can kind of screw you if you're in the wrong deck state.
Yeah, I guess the other cool synergy thing you can do with this card, since when you slam the climax, both effects, the climax's effect and this card's effect, prime simultaneously, you're able to perform the Eris's effect first to get additional potential standby targets into your waiting room before you resolve the standby trigger.
As well as the Rudy pop back, you can trigger those all at once, so you can like play down this, mill 2, then pop the Rudy, so you can actually rearrange rearrange the cards that matter and going into your attack step, and then perform your standby out of order, which is really, really. Then also level 1, we have this 1-0 Ghislaine. It is a 6k if you have a full board, 500 for each other. Then at the beginning of the climax phase, note you must perform this effect before you slam that climax in your hand. If you slam the climax in your hand, you pass up the check timing. Beginning of your climax phase, you clock yourself on the top of your deck. If you do, this card gets an extra 1000 power, and when it gets a reverse, you look at up to top 4, choose a character, add it to your hand. So a little bit of first deck speed helps us get to the next level, so we can accelerate ourselves to level 2 so that we can standby out a 3-2. Again, this happens before we slam our standby climax, so all that extra damage works out in our favor. We're able to standby out something like the Roxy back row or something, a Paul or something like that if we want to, just for a little bit of extra early power spike if we eat damage early. Then we get to try to sit on our deck and get some cancels and win the game that way, just by having such an insane board so early that our opponent can never hope to answer. But yeah, also extra deck speed. Because we are opting not to play Chiiri, as probably people have found out by now, because it's not on-demand filter, it's not proactive filter, it's reactive slow filter. This is sort of our go-to deck speed engine here for the cost of clocking ourselves. So it's really only for first deck. Once we get to second deck, we're really going to be just trying to sit on our deck like a normal, grind out the game then. Okay, so moving on to level 2 targets, we have the 2-2 Strong Body Ghislaine. It gets 2k for each character in our back row, which means it caps out at 9k, a little small for a 2-2 standby target, but gives a global 1k to all other characters, sort of balance out for that. So it will make our 1-1s 8-5. If we trigger a second one, our 1-1s are 9-5, and that other one in the front will 10k, which is really, really hard for your opponents to clear. And because of all the extra twin drive, the extra triggers that you're going to get going into your attack step, the way Mushoku Tensei will usually do is they will swing once, swing twice, and if they don't trigger a standby in either of those first 2 swings, they will twin drive willy-nilly just to get another trigger, because having a 9-5, 9-5, 10k is really hard for most decks to deal with because it's spread out across the board. We're also running a traditional 2-2 where it's just a 10k hand on core. Just for those other matchups where our opponent is probably going to be able to beat over our card, the hand on core is invaluable to make sure we can keep up the damage race, keep up a 2-soul beater, and make sure we still have board, just as some insurance. We're playing 5 2-2s because we are playing so hard into that triggering a dish strategy. We want to have more targets to put out. Even late game, summoning extra Ghislaines and stuff like that is good because they do give extra power, and the power on your board will scale up and up and up and up, even though the Ghislaine herself is only 9.
Yeah, I mean, absolute worst case, it's a 2-soul attacker. It'll get you there.
Counters in the deck. We got all of them here on one slide. We got the
Here we go.
1-0-2k. We're only playing 1 again because we can add it back every time we play Eris Climax. Make sure we have it. We can purge it out of our deck. We only need it in specific matchups because our main game plan is just going to be to tank up on continuous power rather than rely on backups to win field. But if you have it, you need it. It's matchup dependent. You go and search it or you salvage it with her combo. We have the anti-change counter, the Ghislaine. It is a pay 3 sack 1. Notably, if you combine this with Eris hand on core, you can hand on core your Eris in your field, kind of making it a pay 3-1 if you have that field set up. Be cool. Because we do not have early play healers in my Mushoku, anti-change counter becomes a lot more important because it helps us grind out that game, even if all it does is fog 1 attack. That is 1 less attack that we have to risk canceling, just so that we can extend our level 2 game as long as possible to build our largest board. Rounding out the counters, the tap counter.
Speaking of fogging an attack, yeah.
The auto at the
AAA.
Yeah, the pay 5 ditch 1 tap counter. This is the Mushoku Tensei card. Every deck of Mushoku Tensei will probably play it, even if they're not playing a build that relatively supports it. They will probably slot it just so that you are forced to play around it. It is a very, very powerful card. Being able to turn off your opponent's climax combos makes it so that they can't play, like, they have to field 3 to get 2, they have to play 2 to get 1. It's a really, really disgusting defensive card and is right at home here in a defensive strategy like standby. Level 3 standby cards, we got the Paul. Paul's pretty cool. So he's dinner in center stage. He gets 1500 power to all your characters himself, so it'll be 10k. And then he has twin drive inherently, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the third effect is really wild. So up to 1 time per turn. During this card's battle, when the damage you receive is canceled, so when it's your opponent's turn and they're swinging into it, if damage in Paul's lane is canceled, if your opponent front attacks, so if they side because it's during this card's battle, that's how that rule works. They side, it doesn't trigger, but on everything else, if you cancel, you must mill the top card of your deck. Mill is mandatory. but if that card has a soul icon, discard one character and reflect that damage. That makes this card really hard for your opponent to play around. It might make your opponent force like crash into Paul rather than crash into a different lane and try to challenge Paul because they don't want to risk being burned, leaving your Paul on the field to continue to put up that effect the following turn. It's a really, really nasty effect. It is very edge case, but it's mostly a deterrent more than anything. It's mostly here for the global power, and the twin drive is a nice carry on top.
Yeah, it's definitely very scary to sit across from. Just the prospect that your damage could be reflected. You have to really, really keep that in mind, because if you do end up swinging into Paul, you could be taking 3 right back at your face because your opponent in their late game deck state is likely to cancel 3.
Yeah, and then of course, no standby deck is complete without a 2k to front assist. He's also on play, draw 2, ditch 1, helps you dig into your endgame climax to maybe push some damage if you need to play this card from hand. He has another crazy effect that gives twin drive whenever you trigger a climax. If you trigger a climax, you give any of your characters 1,000 power and twin drive so that you can instantly pay out that climax. Really good synergy, helps put extra triggers. If you get this card out early, like we said, by clocking yourself and getting this card out to the board, this is your primary priority. If you have standbys in hand at level 2, you want to get this card out first, this Roxy assist, then put out your Paul to the front row. Because if your Paul goes to the back row, it's practically used for a turn. But the Roxy is important all game long, and you always want to have it. You want to get that out there as quickly as possible.
You're a standby deck. That frontal 2k is invaluable to your game plan. All you want to do is hold board and be defensive.
Yeah.
Plus that twin drive's pretty sick. That effect is really, really nasty. It feels bad when your opponent just never has climaxes in their stock.
Yeah, or just triggers more climaxes as a bigger board. There's no good outcome for your opponent. Really, really cool. All right, last level 3s before we get into the finisher here. We got 1 Sylphie stock swap. The memory effect is completely irrelevant. We're only playing it because of stock swap, and we have just enough green with our ability to set our colors with the Rougeur No Sprite that we might be able to play it in the games that we need it. It's important just to have it because the threat of it means that our opponent cannot sit on massive stock, which would be really bad for you as a standby deck that's always winning board and swinging into open lanes, constantly overswinging. If you don't have a way to make sure your opponent can't disrespect you and sit on a mountain of stock, you're not going to do too much because you're going to be overswinging. Your opponent's likely going to be canceling. Bad news bears for you. So because you have the Sylphie in your deck, your opponent is forced to respect it, even if it might be a little hard for you to play. It's not as hard as you think because you don't want to clock yourself with it later. The only real tech card is your Receptionist. So the fact that you can search this out and really level or Rouge later because you're not going to use that card too much late game gives you better access to green than you might think. Lastly here, this is my sort of spicy pick. I guess it's not too spicy. A lot of decks do run this card, but this is the early play Heiress, and I'll get into why we're only playing 1. So it's a 2 or less early play. That's important for why we're only playing 1. And if you have 2 or more characters on the board, she's 11k base, and then when she gets reversed, you can discard a card and pop her back to your hand. So if your opponent does beat over it or something, you can always pop it back. And then she has another effect where on play, in our deck, we're not playing the event, so on play, reveal top. If it's a character, you burn your opponent for 1. A little bit of extra damage, a really big body. If your opponent does happen to clear it, you filter out your hand and add it back. But the 2 or less climax early play part is really cool. Think about the Roxy event, right? The Roxy event, if we level up, we go from 1 to 2, and we're going over refresh. This card goes back into our deck, right? We refresh. Search. We rip this card out of our deck because we know that we only taken 1 attack. We ate it, so we can only ever possibly cancel twice. So we'll always be able to play the card. We rip it out of our deck, and then we have a massive body on board because this will probably stay on board all the way till endgame. The way that your powers work out, this card goes 12, Roxy comes down, it goes 14, you get a Paul down, goes to 15-5. The card gets really, really massive, really, really fast, being at base 11k stat. And it has that nice little offensive effect to push a little bit of extra damage to get you there. And it's a more precise damage number than you can otherwise swing because it doesn't, the way to ping for 1 without conceding a big body on later. So it's something that I really like. If you don't like it, you can always swap in a different tech level 3, bump up your numbers, or maybe play that Liliola talked about, that level 0 back row card that can help hard remove cards. But I think this card is really cool, and it's something that you should consider playing with how the Roxy event allows you to toolbox you level by level, as well as being some really great selection of the game. Lastly, Ghislaine Climax combo. This is the only level 3 healer in our deck, which is kind of weird for a standby deck. It's a kind of low amount of healers. However, in her lane, as long as you have a full board, she has plus 5k power, and your opponent can't play event cards or backup cards. Your card cannot interact with this card's attack, but will always clear its lane. Good against opposing standby decks, good against any deck with defensive counters, which is really, really cool. And then on attack with a standby, standby, pay 2, burn 2. So swing 2, or burn 2, then swing 2. Pretty good numbers for finishing games.
Two's a great number, yep.
Yeah, it's exactly what you want. The rate is pretty good. You got to watch yourself playing this deck. You have to have really hard decisions when you have tap counter and you're at level 3 first, and you want to push extra damage, but you can't afford to not hold tap counter. I am a firm believer that you always want to hold up tap counter in those situations. You always want to hold up your defensive counters. So make sure that you don't put yourself at the low enough threshold that you aren't able to do it, because tap counter will pretty much always give you an extra turn unless you are really uncompressed or really high level 3 already. So definitely prioritize the tap counter over going through the combo. But the combo itself is pretty good, especially if you're just being a quote-unquote incidental combo. We're not really playing into this very hard. You're not going to triple Ghislaine a lot of the games. You're going to pop your Roxy events, go search a Ghislaine or two just for your heals, maybe just to win board, and then if you happen to have the climax, you combo if you want to kind of push game. But otherwise, that's how this card is intended to be used. You search it out with your Roxy pendant when they pop when you go to level 3. You have your healers, and if you draw your climax, you have your finisher. So really cool synergy there. Again, the Roxy event whole package here. So I jump back to this slide temporarily. This is the reason you are playing Mushoku Tensei, no matter what build you are playing. So make sure you keep that in mind, both when you are building Mushoku Tensei decks and when you are playing 8 standby. Here's the list one more time. Again, like I said, lots of tech cards, really crutching on that Roxy event, and we're going to build some really crazy power. If you haven't played in an 8 standby Mushoku yet, pretty typical for have 2+ 1/1 heiresses on board, maybe a 1/0 Ghislaine. So that is with a Ghislaine 2/2 in the back row. That's 8/5 and then they have the backups like 10/5 to 9K in every lane. If they have an extra Ghislaines, 9/5 9/5 10K like we talked about. It's pretty oppressive pretty quickly. One of the only decks that's able to even challenge the true nut board of 1/1 with a back row is like Ruby, and they have to pump a lane first and have 2 combos. It's still pretty rough for them to do it, and then even then only one of their lanes is challenging, which, you know, is fine for them, but it's still a pretty crazy power number. And I think that's the main thing people are pointing to when they are saying this is going to be the next meta threat, just because it puts up big numbers so big that it forces other decks to consider those numbers when building for their level 1.
I mean, everything pumps. Your opponent hits late level 1, early level 2. Those 2/2 Ghislaines start coming down. Paul comes down. Roxy comes down. And it's just, if you don't have any sort of hard removal options, those numbers are just hard to get over with a raw attack.
The good thing is, when you do, those cards are dead because they do not have hand on core. So that's the important thing to keep in mind with, is that if you do have a way to challenge lanes with power, so something like level 2 killer to kill the Ghislaine and stuff like that, your opponent will not be able to save those cards and they will be gone. The problem then is that Mushoku pushes so many triggers, they likely don't care too much. As long as they win at least 1 or 2 lanes, they can
just come right back. Yeah,
put out their tech cards, standby over that tech card late, get in a standby turn. So it can be pretty oppressive. As someone who's played the deck a decent amount and played into it quite a bit with other people, both online and in person, went to Jersey and stuff for some event, it can be pretty gross to sit again if you're not prepared for it. You definitely have to build in mind with this deck. It's not quite to the Dow level where everything has to build with this deck in mind, because there's not a crazy scryage or stuff like that, but the power lines are definitely something to keep in, and this is the new power line deck to think about. All right, last slide. We go over all the time. Card games, competitive. We don't own or operate those discords, but we are in them and participating in them. If you're looking to talk about Weiss, maybe catch some webcam games or play on Weiss Fight or something like that, definitely give those a look. Weiss Schwartz Global, Weiss Schwartz NA. If you're looking to buy, sell, and trade Weiss, get in the game, you're looking to talk with them on Facebook, or get new card reveals for JP, which are posted in Weiss Schwartz Global community, definitely give that a look. There are also community translations that are updated by our good friend Kevin from Broken in both of the discords as well. So you have all those ways to get those new card reveals straight to you in the way that is most convenient to you. And of course, Weiss Fight, if you want to give Mushoku Tensei a spin, you can pop down to our description, grab the Cortex link, point yourself over to weissfight.net, make an account, log in there, copy paste that link, and then you are playing right then in your browser with people from all over the world. The entire game is simulated there for you to try, so you can pick up any deck from Encore Decks, slam it in there, and give it a go. So definitely give that a look if you're interested in supporting the project. There's both Patreon and a Discord where you back and support the project if you like, to make it better and better. The dev is very receptive feedback and stuff like that to make sure that the app is as good as it can be. So definitely give that a look. Brian, anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
As far as this deck is concerned, with Springfest coming up, definitely expect to see a fair amount of this. And at least probably, I'd say at least half least 50% of teams will probably have this, probably more. Maybe
in some form, right?
Yeah.
8 standby or choice.
Yeah, Mushoku at the very least. It's new, it's popular, it's strong, it's going to be everywhere. Definitely keep your eyes open for that.
Yeah, you will definitely see it, that's for sure. Don't go to a Spring Fest and expect to dodge this, unless, you know, you're trying to team dodge it. But it will be something that your team has to deal with, for sure. This and Hololive, depending on which regional you attend.
They're both going to be everywhere, yeah. Hololive's going to be very popular, too.
Upcoming content, Rush Rundowns, again, we keep saying they're made. I'm moved into my new place, which is cool, but I have another real-life thing that I have to deal with, so they may be delayed a bit, but we do want to try to get the ones out that we can. We are still working on them. Other than that, you're going to see more deck techs, like usual, and then maybe some other cool content. There's some other things that we're kicking around, like the Vivi custom set review is something like that, something that we want to try, see how it was received, and it seemed like people liked it. That was something that Paru put a lot of like love, care, and effort into, and we wanted to highlight. So just things like that are neat. Maybe some more gameplay. Obviously, we're still streaming Tuesday nights now, around 7 EST. We go live. There's not a lot of interaction with chat and stuff like that, but there is a lot of like, what is it like? It ends up being like 3.5 hours of gameplay over the course of the night. It goes off my phone, so we check chat as much as we can, but it, you know, we're there for locals. We're there to hang out. We're have fun, play games. So we check it as much as we can, but it is mostly there just to have some form of gameplay content and highlight our awesome locals. We've been popping off lately. It's great. Yeah, we had 16 people just at the last Tuesday at our brand new shops. It's awesome. Lots of new faces, new people getting into the game. Make sure you get out there to your locals. Make sure you contribute, get there, hop into bracket, hop into friendlies, get some games going, get new people into the game. It's always good to see this period of rapid growth with all these crazy sets coming over, English exclusives, new good sets from JP from recent anime properties like Mushoku Tensei that are really driving Play Schwartz onwards and upward. Cool. We beat out Vanguard for the first time in sales. You know, collector boom, you know, what you might say, but it's still, you know, we'll take it. We'll take being over Vanguard for the first time. It's awesome.
I mean, we do like the shiny cards too, so
yeah, for sure. All right, and with that, it's for White Schwartz signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one.